In this tutorial, I will teach you how to blend objects with your landscape environment. So your environments will stop looking like this and start looking like this. It looks a lot more realistic. Now, we're going to be using virtual textures. If you don't want to go through this entire process through scratch, you just want to get the end product, then you can download the Unreal Sensei Landscape Master Material for free, link in the description below. So go ahead and check that out if you don't want to go through this entire process, but I recommend you do because there's some good skills that you will learn, and virtual texturing is the future. I think it's good to know how Unreal Engine handles virtual texturing. So without further ado, let's jump into this tutorial. Alrighty, so here we are in the Australian outback. We even have some birds above us, and this scene's pretty cool. If you want to follow along, I highly encourage you do. That's how you actually know what's happening. You can follow along and get the scene you see right here in the Unreal Engine store for free. So you can use it in all your projects, and it's pretty amazing the amount of free content Epic Games is releasing every single day. Also, keep in mind that if you are a complete beginner in Unreal Engine, this tutorial is not for you. Go back and watch my beginner tutorial series and then come back to this video. So here we have an Australian log, and then we have Australian ground. And you'll notice that this log looks pretty bad in that it's not blending well with the ground. It's literally just copy and pasted right here. There's a really sharp edge between the ground and the log texture, and it makes this look fake. So in this tutorial, we're going to get rid of this through the use of virtual textures. So if virtual textures are not enabled in your project, you can enable it up here. Go to settings, project settings, go to all settings, and then type in virtual texture, and make sure you have this enabled. And of course, you need to restart your engine if it's not already restarted. It might take a while for your shaders to compile, but now we're back in Australia. So we have to make two virtual textures. One virtual texture, which will actually be the height map of our landscape, and the other virtual texture that will be the material of our landscape. So I'm just creating a new folder. Let's call this virtual textures. And inside of here, we're going to right click, go to materials, and then we're going to go to runtime virtual textures. So we'll create two of these. Let's call this VT_height. Control W to duplicate that, and we're going to call this one VT_map for material. So within height, we're going to open this up, drag this over here, and for virtual texture content, we're just going to bring this to world height. And then for VT_maps, we're going to lead this as base color, normal, roughness, and specular. Now we'll notice that the size of the virtual texture is right now 256. This will probably be a little bit too low, so we could bring this up to 10, which will be 1024 for both of these. And now that we have these, let's save. Okay, now that we create our virtual textures within the content browser, it's time to specify what location of our landscape should this virtual texture capture. So essentially what we're doing is that we're going to specify the bounds from which our virtual texture will capture that height data, capture that material data from our landscape. And to specify those bounds, when you go to place actors, type in runtime virtual textures, and just drag this into a world like that. So we'll see we have this little square, and this is our capture volume. We can increase this capture volume manually through the scale. So we can make this like 200, 200. Or we can have Unreal automatically capture the entire landscape. So first off, I'm going to go drag VT_height into the virtual texture field right there. And then I'm going to specify the landscape I want this bound to encompass, which is this landscape right here. So I'm going to use the eye picker icon, actually just the picker icon. Select this, and then select our landscape like that. And then click on set bounds. So that will just manually increase and set the boundaries for us, which is pretty nice, pretty fast. And making sure runtime virtual texture is selected. If you can't see it in your world because it's the same color as the landscape, I think you could barely see it right here, but it's pretty hard. Make sure it's selected in the world outliner, and then press Control W to duplicate that. So now that we have two of these here, within the new one we just made, I'm going to drag VT_matte, which will capture the actual landscape material. And I'm just going to go back to where our test log is. Okay, now it's the pretty tricky part. So our virtual textures, the boundaries from which it should capture has already been established, but now the issue is that it doesn't know what to capture. We can't just specify height or matte. We need to actually manually go into the landscape material and tell Unreal what the virtual texture should capture. So we're just going to select the landscape, go down to the landscape material instance, and then we need to go down to the landscape master material. So of course, this will be different for each landscape material you create. The auto material that is available for free on my Gumroad, link in the description below, has this already set up for you. But I'll just go over the process on setting it up on some random material, aka this one. So firstly, we need the color, the specular, the roughness, and the normal. So we're going to tell the virtual texture that it's these channels through left click, runtime, virtual texture output. So we're just going to grab that there, and we're going to hook up everything here. So we're going to go base color, specular, roughness, and normal. Now you're wondering probably right now how we're going to get the height data. Well, we can do that through absolute world position, or I think it's just world position. If we can find it here. And with absolute world position, we're going to go grab the B component, which is aka we're going to grab the Z field, since in Unreal Z is up and down. So we're going to do that through a component mask, I believe. Because right now this is giving out 3 different channels. And we're only going to specify B and uncheck G and R. So with that now selected, all we have to do is bring this into world height, just like that. So this part is a little tricky and it gets a lot of people hung up when they're trying to make a virtual texture. But right now it doesn't look like this, but the normal map that the landscape gives off is in tangent space, and we want it to be in world space because we want to blend our landscape normal map with the normal map of our mesh, aka the log. So to do that, we just need to drag out normal, go transform vector, and then it's automatically tangent space to world space. So now that's like that. We're going to plug this up to the normal map just like this. Now we're just going to hit apply, save, and now my computer's on fire because it's compiling shaders. And within Australia, we want to specify and make sure that it is these 2 virtual textures that is getting the output from here, from our material. So we need to click on the landscape, scroll all the way down until we make it to virtual textures. And in draw in virtual textures, we want to add 2. So we're going to click on this plus icon 2 times. And we're going to drag in the height and drag in the matte. And then we're going to save. So you can already see right here that our virtual texturing is picking up the color and is picking up the height of our landscape, which is pretty cool. So that's how we know that our virtual textures are working right now. I think it's also pretty important to note that you don't have to use virtual textures just with landscapes. Right now, I'm in the Weta Digital Meerkat example map. And if we click on the landscape here, this actually isn't a landscape. This is a massive static mesh. But if we zoom in on this rock right here, we can see that I'm still getting the blending. So it's the exact same process as beforehand. So if we go into the sandstone, the landscape material, or it's not actually landscape material, it's the material on this massive static mesh, we can see that I'm doing the exact same process as I did in the Australia example. But instead of dragging off from, let's say here, I'm dragging off from the material attribute, and then I'm using get material attributes to break apart that material attribute and get those base color, specular, roughness, and normal. So if you don't have those channels available to you and you just have a material attribute, you can always drag off it and go break material attributes and get those channels yourself. and drag those into the runtime virtual texture. And do not forget to make sure transform vector, tangent space to world space is in between the normal outputs. And of course, within the master level, within your static mesh that serves as the landscape, if you scroll down under virtual textures, you just drag in those two virtual textures as before, just like in the landscape. So there is really no difference. Virtual texturing doesn't just work with landscapes, it also works with static meshes if you built your world like that. Okay, we are back from that detour. So now we're gonna apply these virtual textures onto our log. So I'm just gonna click on the log and we're gonna go into the material instance. And we're gonna scroll all the way down until we get the parent, open this up. And this is what we're gonna be editing right now. So here we have basically all of this is our original material. So I'm just pressing C, original material, to comment all of these nodes. And then we're going to use a blend material attributes. Since just by looking at it, we can see that they already made the material attribute before they output it. And we're going to blend our original with our new material that we're going to get from our virtual texture. So first off, we need to actually specify what's going to be the alpha, aka where do we put our virtual texture material onto our log material. And we're going to use that through height. So we're going to go right click, type in virtual texture, and we're going to do a virtual texture sample parameter. And we're going to do parameter and not the sample because I want to be able to edit these virtual textures and choose what virtual textures to use. Press enter and bring that in. We're going to call this VT height in the material instance. So now that we have our VT height here, we need to get the absolute world position of our log. So we're going to do, again, world position, and it is at the very top. It's a bit confusing since this node is called world position, but then when you get it in, it's automatically saying absolute world position. So we're going to do the same thing before. We're going to use a component mask, and we're going to grab the Z value, which is just the B value. So uncheck R, uncheck G, and check B. Now we're going to get the world height from our VT underscore height and subtract it from the absolute world position. So you're going to drag out a line there, and we're going to type in subtract, bring the world height into it just like this. And now, sometimes, just by itself, it would be working right now, but sometimes we have bigger logs or sometimes we have smaller logs. So we need to take into account how large this log is. And we're going to do that through the object bounds. So right here, type in an object bounds, pressing enter, and we're going to again get the Z. So we could go through here, do component mask, or I can just duplicate this mask right here using Control and W, bring it in like this. And then we're going to add this. So the shortcut for add is hold it down A and left clicking this onto the subtract. Now we want a function that will basically function as our height so we can control when the blend starts and when it stops. So we're going to use a multiply out here like this. And I'm going to hold down S and left click, which will give me a scalar parameter. So a constant scalar parameter. So again, that is S, left click to bring in a parameter like that. Or you can just type in constant vector, right click, and do convert to parameter. But using the S and left clicking just saves a couple extra clicks. So we're going to do virtual blend height is what we're going to call it. And let's give it a default value of 1. Actually, let's go 1.05. And I'm going to put this into multiply. So now this is like this. I'm going to go hold down S again, left click. Actually, my bad. I thought that was going to bring in a subtract. I'll just grab the subtract, press Control W, bring it in. And now we're going to hook up the add to there. And then we're going to hook up the multiply. And let's give this a fall off so we can control how harsh the blend between our landscape and our log will be. So we can do that with a divide. So right click, type in divide, bring it in like this, hold S, left click, and we're going to call this the virtual fall off. You can name these parameters whatever, anything that floats your boat. So I'm just going to give this default value of 100. Read it in like this. And then I'm going to go clamp this value between 0 and 1. Also, this is good to know, if you ever see saturate, saturate is basically just a shortcut for clamping between 0 and 1. So right now, this node and that node are the exact same thing. So instead of using clamp, I'll just use saturate. I think maybe saturate is a little bit more performant than clamp. In case you are curious at exactly what we just did, we can visualize what we did by, let's make a material attribute right now. And keep in mind, this is very temporary. You don't have to follow along right now. I just want to show exactly what all of this does. And I'm going to plug this in a base color like that. And then we're going to plug this into our material output. And we can already see that we have a black and we have a white. So I'm going to press apply, go out into here, and I'm going to go open up my material instance. And we can see that we have this VT underscore height. And if I drag in VT height into it like that, it has now collected the height value from our landscape. But right now there is no height value because it's pretty much flat all around. There's like 50% gray. I think there's one hump right there. And in the global scalar parameter values, we can now control the fall off of this transition between the black and the white right here. So we can increase that fall off and we can increase where it starts. So this gives us control. Right now, black will basically be where the landscape material is projected onto this log, and white is of course the original material, which is our log. So let's go back into our master material and let's just delete that right there, and let's hook this up into the alpha. So B is our original material, and now A will be our landscape material. And we can get our landscape material by doing what we did right there. So we're going to get the virtual texture sample parameter, and this will give us a new virtual texture, and this will be our material. So we just call this VT matte landscape. Now that we have the virtual texture in here that will actually handle our material from the landscape projecting onto our log, we need to test that's actually working. So of course this needs a material attribute here. So we're going to right click, go make material attributes, bring that in there like this, and merely connect everything up. So base color, specular, roughness, and normal. So I'm going to plug it in here like there, hit apply. And if we go back to the log, we'll notice that it's just all black, and that's because we didn't actually specify that we want to use VT underscore matte. So this world specific virtual texture. And to do that, because this is a parameter, we can go and open up the instance here and drag in our virtual texture to our parameter just like this. And now we'll notice it's kind of working right now. Obviously, this is way too shiny, and that's probably because there is no roughness here. And the reason why there is no roughness being projected onto this log is because if we go back into the material, and if we click on our runtime virtual texture parameter, we'll see down here that we need to specify exactly what virtual texture do we want. And if we open up our VT underscore matte, you notice that when we create it, we have virtual texture content as base color, normal, roughness, and specular. So we need to specify it right here in the details panel. So base color, normal, roughness, specular. And while we're at it, I forgot to go down here, although it is working. But just to double check, click here and make sure it is world height. So if I press apply, we should see it working fine right now. All right, there we go. So now we can see that pretty much the normal detail, the color, and the roughness and specular is being carried over from this landscape onto our log. And if we move the log around, we can see it seamlessly kind of blends with the landscape right now. But this is obviously not finished since we need to handle some of the normal map issues that we'll notice. And we need to actually blend this with the original material. If you remember, if we go back into our landscape material, so just click on landscape, open up the material instance, scroll all the way down, open up the master. That when we put in our normal map, we converted it from tangent space to world space. Now let's go back into our log, and we can see that we're not converting it back. And that's fine. That's because we want our normal maps, when we're blending them right here, to be in world space and not in tangent space. This means that the normal map, which is right here, which is by default in tangent space, so we can assume that it is not going to blend well with the normal map from our landscape. So we need to convert this normal map from tangent space to world space right here. And to do that, we need a way to isolate the normal map channel. If we drag from here, this is a material attribute, so it has all these channels combined. And we could do that through get material attributes. So if we get material attributes, go right here to the plus icon, press plus. Let's go change this to normal. And let's go drag it out again. Let's go set material attributes. Do the exact same thing we did, so plus icon, and let's expose the normal map. We can drag from normal and go transform. By default, it is tangent space to world space. And we're going to plug it up into the normal like this. And plug it back here into the B. So basically what's happening is that we're getting the material attributes, which is all the channels combined. We're only getting the normal map. We're transforming it and we're putting it back into our original material attribute. But now it is no longer tangent space. It is now world space. And we plug that up into B. And let's plug in our landscape virtual texture into A. And plug it up like this. So this should work right now. Actually, it's not going to work right now. Because guess what? Our output for a normal map is expecting tangent space. But right now we're outputting world space. So I'm just going to copy and paste these back here. And instead of tangent space to world space, we're going to do world space to tangent space. And plug it back up like this. You can also avoid doing this for a second time by, if we plug it up like this, if we go into our actual material details, scroll down, I believe it is tangent space normal. If we uncheck this, then it would be expecting world space. And since the output of our blend material attribute is world space, we don't need to add this back in. But generally, I don't like to do that. I'd rather just have a couple extra nodes here. So I'm just going to go back and have the get material attributes and set material attributes right there. So maybe that was a little bit complicated. Basically, in order to blend normal maps with blend material attributes, we need two world space normal maps. We can't be blending tangent space with other tangent spaces or tangent spaces to world spaces. So we know what's being outputted from normal map is a world space normal because in our landscape, we converted it right here. And then we manually convert from tangent space to world space of our original material. We blend the two together and the output of this is in world space, so we convert world space back to tangent space. That's some wild normal map math, but I mean, that's how it goes. So I'm going to hit apply and crossing our fingers, hopefully this works. And it appears like it does. Let me go play with the settings just a bit right now. So let me bring it back to its default settings. And let me go bring the fall off just a little bit more down. All right, there we go. So if I bring this into the ground like that, we can see that it is seamlessly blending with the original landscape. And obviously, just as it is right now, it looks a lot better, but we have one issue, and that is on really, really sharp angles, like right here, we can see some really bad texture stretching. And that's because it is projecting the landscape material from top down. So it's not projecting from side to side. That would be triplanar projection, and we're not doing that. So we need a way to be able to isolate the angles right here. That's how we don't get that nasty texture stretching. So we'll do that right now. So I'm going to go save my material instance because it's looking nice right now. And let's go back into m_nature. What we're going to do now is kind of get the angles of our mesh and isolate out the really sharp angles. So right here, which will get rid of that texture stretching. And we could do that through the vertex normal node. So right click, go vertex normal. And we only wanted it on the Z-axis, of course. So we're going to do components. And have B, uncheck G, uncheck R. Hold down M. Let's left click. Let's bring in the multiply. And I'm going to hold down S. Left click again. And let's call this side contrast. This will control the amount of the side that we're going to be getting rid of right now. So A, plug it up like this. And then we're going to use saturate node to clamp it to 0 and 1. Then we're going to go multiply this, just like that, with the original texture right here. Actually, what I'm going to do is invert this. Because right now it's black to white. We want to subtract it from... Right now it's black on the bottom and on top. We want white on the bottom and black on the top. That's how we're actually able to subtract it like this by using a multiply. And then I'm going to control W again. This, in case you don't know what 1 minus X, this is an inversion. So black becomes white, white becomes black. And plug it up again like this. So now this is going to go handle our sides. And while we're at it, I'm just going to go... start commenting everything. So let's go height virtual texture. Let's highlight all these, press C. Let's go remove sides. And right here, we're going to go blend materials. And right here, this is a landscape material. Just for our own sanity. And we're going to plug it up like this instead of that alpha. So hopefully this worked. Press apply. And if we go back here. Alright, we can see it's working. So now those sharp angles are gone. And we don't have that nasty texture stretching anymore. Congratulations, that is pretty much how you make a virtual texture. You can move this around, play with the parameters, and it just adds, look at this. This just adds a whole nother level of realism that wasn't possible beforehand. Now, let's make this a little bit more modular. Let's go over how we can take this same technology and apply it to the Megascans. So if we open up the Megascans asset, this is literally just straight from Bridge right now. If I open up and scroll down, and let's go into the Megascans default master material. Let us hook up our virtual texture right here. Now let's go into our log again, once again. Now what we could do, and this is the really janky way of doing it, we could just have everything like this, like that, highlight everything. Actually, let's highlight everything, Control C. Go into here, Control V, and plug it up like that. But that's just gross. No one wants to do this. So instead, we're going to make a little modular material function that we can place into any material that will quickly give us RVT without any fuss. So we can do that by, first we have to create the material. So just anywhere, let's go. Actually, our dude is there, materials. Oh, presets right here. So we're going to right click and we're going to go to materials, material function, and let's call this mf_vt. Let's go into it right here. Missing function results. And now we're going to go copy and paste in all the VT functionality and hook up the output like this. And for the input, let's go input right here, function input. Let's change this to a material attribute. So scroll all the way down here within the details panel with the input selected, select material attributes. Hook it up just like this, and we're going to hit apply. And then we're going to press browse. That's how we can jump back to our material function. And now I'm going to grab my material function and merely drag it into the Megascans material like that. Plug it up like this. Organize it just a bit. Hit apply. And boom. Now we have virtual textures, although it looks bad right now since we need to go into the material instance and specify the virtual textures we are using right now. So let's go find where those virtual textures are. Just like this. And down here under global texture parameters, let's check both these boxes. Drag in the height and drag in the material. And now we get some amazing blending with the Megascans assets. So we can move it around, scale it, move it like this, and it just naturally fits into the environment. So let's actually go over, let's go make our material just a little bit better. So I'm gonna hold down Alt and let's go drag out a second one, and let's jump back into right here, our material function, and let's give ourselves a parameter right here. So let's go static switch parameter, which is basically going to expose a bool to us, and we're going to use VT. Let's make it true by default. So if we want to use VT, we will use all of this. Or if we don't want to use virtual texturing, then we're just going to ignore all of this. So we're going to drag out from the original output like that. So that's how we have it. Just customization, because sometimes we might not want to use VT, or maybe with your virtual textures, maybe your project doesn't support it. So I'm going to press apply. And now we have a little switch that we can turn on and off right here. If we go into our material instance, let's go find out where that switch is. Okay, here it is, use VT. Just compile a bit, and now we can check this on or off and on. So this is, I'm gonna go full screen real quickly because this is pretty cool. So here is our Megascan asset before virtual texturing. Look, that completely fake. And here it is after virtual texturing. Before, after. So yeah, I'd say virtual texturing is a pretty big deal. It's definitely going to be the difference between a good environment and a bad environment. If you're not already using it right now, I highly suggest you do. Especially since we literally turn our virtual texture into a very simple little node right here. Then you can just copy and paste into all of your materials with no fuss. Get some of that sweet virtual texturing with a little setup. Okay, congratulations. This is the end of the tutorial. I hope you will enjoy this asset. Now, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to boost this in the YouTube algorithm, and to also hit the bell icon, since I will be doing a lot more of the YouTube community posts, and I'll be interacting with the community a lot more within those community posts. So if you have any questions, go on them, and I might be streaming soon. So maybe do some Q&As or some live tutorials if there is enough of a demand. And don't forget to subscribe to the Unreal Sensei newsletter. So, hope everyone's having a good one, and goodbye.